So it is my great pleasure to be welcoming here on stage Begimai Marlenova. Thank you very much for giving us now a short impulse into what we know from a research perspective and what we don't know about achieving sustainability performance with supply chain finance. Thank you, Begimai.
Thanks, David, for introducing me. It's my great pleasure to be here. I would like to present you my presentation about the research perspective on sustainable supply chain finance. First of all, I would like to introduce you the different type of financial methods that are used in supply chains. We know that there are different type of financing methods in supply chains, but most of them, they can be divided into two, such as pre-shipment financing and post-shipment financing. Basically, pre-shipment financing, it's a method when the when the payment is done before the goods are delivered, and the post-shipment financing is the method when the payment is done after the goods were delivered. However, there might be also some situations when the cash, for example, is also paid on the delivery. If you go to the different methods, especially like particular methods in the pre-shipment financing, the one, for example, purchase order financing, which is on the bottom left, it's more about when the financing institution gives a loan to the buyer to pay for its purchase order to the supplier, but the payment can only be the loan can only be given for this specific purchase orders. The purchase order can be also buyer-backed, and there are also some other methods, for example, buyer intermediate financing, advanced payment, or buyer direct financing. The more interesting also part, for example, post-shipment financing, which is trade credit. Trade credit is basically a payment by the buyer, which is done quite late, and it can be paid either in 30 or 60 or 90 days. If you go to the traditional factoring with a recourse, it's basically selling of invoices by the supplier to the intermediary. But here, the supplier, he also bears the risks for the payment. So what's more interesting for our topic today, it's about sustainable supply chain finance, and we covered the topic of the supply chain finance. Supply chain finance and reverse factoring, it's basically the same term, and it's a buyer-led initiative, which is opposite to the traditional factoring with a recourse. Here, the buyer gives financing terms, and the suppliers, they get better liquidity and better also payment terms. If you go to the sustainability and supply chain finance, it's actually like how the sustainability can be promoted with the supply chain finance. It can be promoted in these three ways. First, all suppliers use the platform to become more sustainable, or there are some better terms, payment terms, that are provided for more sustainable suppliers, or only sustainable suppliers can use the supply chain finance. If you dive deeper into this idea of the sustainable supply chain finance, there are different concepts that first were already explored in the literature. In the overview, for example, the supply chain sustainability, it was quite an early topic, and it has been quite well researched for past 20 years. And for example, supply chain sustainability in the literature is mostly described as a win-win solution. It basically gives us a very good environmental and corporate performance. Corporate performance might be financial performance or any other performance. And it basically gives us a license to do business. Because currently now, most of the customers, different institutions, the government, they require the buyers and also suppliers to be very environmentally friendly and also very transparent regarding what kind of goods and materials they're usually actually using in their production systems. However, sustainability in supply chains, it has to be quite very well incentivized and also pushed. But how it can be done? There are also different external and internal incentives. For example, there might be, as it was already said, financial incentives or external incentives from the government, from the different type of institutions. For example, like UN, the promotion of these ESG forms. And with their goals that we now have for the human rights and for other different sustainability aspects, which are very important for us now. Or it might be also just an incentive just coming from our competitors, from the business competitors, which also who are more sustainable, and the other firms also need to stay at the same line. If you come to the supply chain finance, as it was already said, yeah, it's a buyer-led initiative, which gives a very favorable receivables financing for their suppliers. And suppliers, they get the liquidity at better terms. For example, supply chain sustainability, it's a win-win solution, but the supply chain finance, it's a 3 times win solution. So basically, financial institution, the buyer, and the supplier, they all win. But how? For example, financial institutions, they actually get the interest rate from this solution, from this transaction also between the buyer and the supplier. Suppliers, they get liquidity, faster payments, and the buyers, they can also extend their payments. If you come from this old concept, for example, of the supply chain sustainability to the supply chain finance and merge them, we have the sustainable supply chain finance. Overall, in the research, sustainable supply chain finance just has been researched for since 2018. If you can see from the literature that it's cited, and it's quite an emerging concept, which is still on this embryonic level. Basically, the literature says that it promotes financial and social incentives, most financial incentives, and it becomes like a mechanism that helps us to promote and shape the environmental, social, and governance performance, our main, this ESG performance. If, for example, supply chain and sustainability was providing us just a win-win solution for the environment and for the businesses, and supply chain finance was mostly about the financial institutions, buyer, and the suppliers, if you go to sustainable supply chain finance, it's more about 4 times win solution. Basically, first of all, our society wins, yeah, because our suppliers get more sustainable. And how they get more sustainable? Because the buyers, they also try to enable the sustainability aspect by giving them better payment terms. And also financial institutions get this interest rate, and the buyers themselves also can pay it later. For example, also current one of the main examples who started first using this sustainable supply chain finance, it's Puma, and it's also going to be today discussed by one of our panelists later. Thank you very much, David.
Okay, thank you very much, Begimai, for your insightful presentation. I think there was a lot of information, and I hope that you all took notes at home. I think that was very much valuable